Hello, Tony Christ here from Sunshine and Transparency, a program produced by Odyssey Investments weekly. It's free. We're on YouTube. We post on our site, odysseyinvestments.info, weekly. I write a paper each week about our topic. And this week, our topic is Mouse Utopia. That's correct. Mouse Utopia. Can you believe it? Okay, so what is mouse utopia? Why are we even talking about it? Well, let's before we get to mouse utopia, let's talk about some things. Now, most of what we're talking about came about in the 1960s and 70s. Although, if we're really giving proper credit, you've got to almost go back to Malthus, who in 1798 proposed that human population and will outgrow the food supply. Well, that was people scratch their heads and said, oh, well, that's not good. The population outgrows the food supply. What are we going to eat? Right. Okay. Well, that took many forms over time, and incidentally, the population is much greater than it was back even in 1800. In 1800, it was 1 billion. Today, it's 8.2 billion. In 1940, it was 2 billion. So from 1800 to 1940, it only went up a billion, and it's gone up to 8.2 billion today. That's September 7th, 2024, according to Worldometer. That's what it reads. So now, what does all this mean? Are we changing as this population is growing? Are there limits? There are many people that do believe in Malthus, and some billionaires believe in him, and they believe population ought to be restricted. China came out with the one-child thing, and that's why their demographics are falling apart today. The one child were usually males, and they're very short on females in China. And of course, you need both to create a child, and so their next generation is diminished. And actually, the demographics in every industrialized country are turning very southerly. We allow a tremendous amount of immigrants in with younger ages, so we're not in that group, although we face our own separate set of problems. But the demographics are turning south. So let's talk about human nature, and we're going to talk about shortly. We're going to talk about mice. But before we get to mice, I want to talk about B.F. Skinner. He was a Harvard psychology professor in the late 50s to early 70s. And he came up, he also was a tinkerer and an inventor, and he came up with what was called the Skinner box. And among the things he addressed, and this wasn't the largest thing he addressed, but I'm going to bring it up, and we're going to talk about it. He had rats in a Skinner box pressing a lever to get a pellet. Well, naturally, if you're a rat, you want to eat, you're going to press the lever, right? Well, he did some experiments to see what would cause the rat to press the lever more, because the lever was like work, right? So what combination would cause him to press it more? So he did some variable reinforcement. In other words, every fifth time the rat pressed the lever, a pellet came out. and he did some very not without any pattern. And he found that if he did a system of rewards without a pattern, in other words, the rat could press a lever 10 times and then a pellet came out. Then he could do it once and another one came out. Then he could do it 8 times and one. He didn't know. The rat couldn't learn how many times to press it. He only knew you have to press it to get a pellet. Well, guess what? That changing the payment of the pellet, the food, is what caused the rat to press the lever the most. They went spastic pressing that lever. So where you have inconsistent reward to work, it seems to maximize effort, at least among rats. Now, let's go on. The late 60s also, there was a professor down at William and Mary. I actually had a course with him, Mckenna, and he was a one of his he was a student, so to speak, as we all were of B.F. Skinner, and he set up at the adjacent to William and Mary's Eastern State Mental Hospital, and he set up a token economy. Now, what's a token? A token economy. Well, he set it up with backward schizophrenics. And now these are adults, not children, who are chronically ill, aren't doing anything. They're sitting against the wall, some of them banging their heads on the wall. So Mckenna went in and he set up a system where they would get paid with monopoly money, actual monopoly money, if they helped to cook in the mental institute's cafeteria. They would get paid with monopoly money if they ran a clothing store that he set up on Goodwill clothes, okay, that were donated. And they had a little knick-knack shop too that they could spend money and get a knick-knack. So what happened? Well, within a year, these backward schizophrenics were working in these three shops. People were buying their clothes. They were dressing differently. That's not to say they were perfectly normal, but my God, they were functioning. Some were working in the cafeteria and being paid. They'd take the money and go to the clothing store, look for a new shirt. Why not? New pair of underpants, whatever. So it was a fantastic eye-opening success, because till that point, these people were totally written off. They'd be a liability, sitting in a corner at a mental institution, banging their head against the wall until the day they died. Okay, this was Mckenna's token economy. So you had all that going on. Then you had another guy, okay, and he was actually working with the government, for the government, and he had a series of rat experiments trying to determine behavior and observe it that he couldn't complete. And then in 1968, he came up with Universe 25. And Universe 25, this was all paid for by the federal government. National Institute of Mental Health financed it. And John Calhoun was an employee. And when he came up with this study, he used mice instead of rats in this particular study in 1968. And in the study, he had started the study with 4 male and 4 female mice that were perfectly healthy. Now, these were government mice. They weren't running in the street, and they were perfectly healthy. And he put them in an environment that he built with tunnels and with 16 portals to get food. And he designed the environment so he, in his mind, thought, we don't know for certain, it would hold 3,000 mice. Okay, he only put 8 in. And all the food in there was accessible. So the mouse didn't have to do anything to get food other than walk down a tunnel and eat it. Okay. He didn't have to. I mean, usually a mouse's life, a mouse must go out and fend for himself and get food. There were no predators. There were no cats in there that could eat the mouse. Okay. So there was nothing. It was an environment that the mouse, it was mouse utopia. I mean, free food, free water, no threat from a predator. What more do you want? Well, so the mice, guess what they did? Well, they sat around and ate and had sex. That's all they did, was eat and have sex. Okay. So the population of mice doubled every 55 days. Now, 55 days can be compared to 20, 25 years for a human being, okay? Because to have a generation, a young adult, create another child who becomes a young adult, it takes about 20, 25 years. So every 55 days, the population was doubling. Now, remember, he had designed it to hold 3,000 mice, okay? So it kept doubling every 55 days until they got up to 620. And at 620, the doubling rate slowed. It slowed dramatically. They only doubled in 145 days. They went from 620 to 1240 in 145 days. And that rate was slowing considerably and soon to stop. So, and as it slowed, they began to notice certain things that were behaviors that weren't occurring in the early days of the experiment. And now you must be mindful here when they're going 55 days to doubling, you're talking like a year and a half. You're talking at least 10, 15 generations. So you would be like talking from the beginning of America to today almost. So in mouse time rather. So they were in mouse utopia, eating and having sex and having a great time. But as these generations passed, there were changes occurring. Mice would withdraw and not respond during attacks, lying there immobile. Now, that was a big change in their behavior. They became inactive. They aggregated in large pools near the center of their floor of the universe. They started to split up. Many of them started to become characterized by wounds. Oftentimes, they would bite the tails of other mice. That's aggression that you wouldn't see, that they didn't see for the first number of generations. So the actual behaviors are changing. And they also had the beginning of a group of female mice that were called groomers that didn't have any desire to participate in sex. And they would go to the upper levels and they would just groom themselves continuously till they died. Okay, so there were different and you would think that's opposed to their natural biology. I mean, he said, even if it's 10, 15 generations, I mean, how do they forget to have sex to procreate? That's a hard thing to forget. You know, there must be some things going on, some things changing in these rapid new generations as more mice come out. And this was phase one of their decline. And it was notable. So this occurred after they had gotten to 600 to about 600 mice, and these problems enlarged as they moved toward their peak. Now their peak was 20. They never made it to 3,000 mice. They only got to 2,200 mice, and that was their peak. And they started exhibiting worse behaviors. Mothers started to stop caring for their young. So they passed none of that learning experience to their young, the learning experience of caring mother for young. And eventually they even begun to cannibalize their young. Okay, that's not good. It's like a mom eating her baby. I don't know, is that abortion? I don't know. When a mom eats her baby, is it a similar thing? Might be. In some sense, in some cultures, it might be considered that. So these behaviors, incidentally, didn't exist prior. So if you went back, nor did they exist for the first number of generations. They developed over 15, 20 generations of replication of that mouse population. And so that was phase one of the decline. Then after that, it didn't get better. It got worse. So after that, they get it gets worse. Uh, so-called alpha mice go around killing other mice. Okay, and the population is dropping. You have the groomers. They're actually, I think Calhoun referred to them as the stupid mice that were sitting there grooming and trying to stay out of the fray. Of course, they were eating, but they weren't having sex. And you had uh, maternally, you had a lot less mice being procreated than you had before. Before you would have extra mice. Now, part of the conclusion, and we're not getting to it yet, was that there was no place for them to immigrate, for them to leave to, the few mice that weren't accepted in a group. And that might have, but I don't think that explained all of it. But it certainly might have explained some of the internal aggression they were showing. And so the population was dropping rapidly. And guess what? They never reached 3,000. They never had an environment that deprived them of food or water for a minute. And they were going to extinction. Extinction. In other words, they not only weren't giving birth to new mice, they were cannibalizing, eating their young, and they were fighting and they were destroying each other. So I guess I'm going to read you two paragraphs that summarize what Calhoun concluded. Now, the study began in 1968. It ended in 1972. For an animal as complex as man, there's no logical reason why a comparable sequence of events should not also lead to species extinction. If opportunities for role fulfillment fall far short of the demand of those capable of filling the roles and having expectations to do so, only violence and disruption of social organization can flow. That's John Calhoun. So he is actually projecting this very sad outcome, total destruction of the population to from mouse utopia to a dystopia, a destruction of everything, as something that we need to be aware of, and that's why we're doing this today. Actually, he goes on, for an animal so simple as a mouse, the most complex behaviors involved the interrelated set of courtship, maternal care, territorial defense, and hierarchical intra and intragroup social organizations. In the normal course of events in a natural ecological setting, somewhat younger mice would survive to maturity that are necessary to replace their dying or sentient established associates, and the excess of younger mice would find no social niche and would emigrate. And that's the only conclusion I saw that some people that reviewed the paper had made, that there wasn't any place for that excess of young mice to emigrate to. But I think there's more to see here, particularly in light of our present social development away from procreation, evident in the demographic collapse in almost every industrialized country today, independent of political persuasion. Project 25, Mouse Utopia, in the context of earlier mentioned work by Professors Skinner and Mckenna, raises some interesting questions for all of us about the future. Now, I did say that this was, in addition to, I actually, let me just rephrase and say it this way, that we have political polarity today. But I'll tell you, both extreme can find a scenario in this experience with mouse utopia that fits them. The conservative extreme will say, well, communists have been saying utopia, providing food and water for everyone's a solution, and this emphatically proves that it leads to total destruction, even though there's never been a communist country that's ever succeeded in providing it for everybody. And the conservatives will say the liberals are at fault. And of course, at the other extreme, your left wingers are going to come out and they're going to say that well, you need a strong central government and rules to protect the weaker from the alpha mice. So the political extremes can have can play this study either direction, but there's something more profound going on that really raises some interesting questions. Why did a stressless reality with regard to plenty of food and water and an absence of predators, call it mouse utopia, lead to sexual abstinence and mouse cannibalism? I mean, and eventually extinction. The whole colony went to zero. Was it solely due to an inability to emigrate? That doesn't quite get it for me. There's other things going on. So what other things are there that happened? Why did mouse utopia turn into mouse dystopia? Well, although Calhoun and others note the inability for mice to emigrate, is that sufficient? I mean, innate behavioral changes were occurring partly because the environment took care of basic needs and wants. So they didn't have to go out and work productively. Let's call obtaining food and water a productive way to work, and defending against predators and all those things you had to do. They didn't have to do any of that. And over generations, they didn't pass the knowledge of doing that to future generations of mice. So the future generations, I mean, they knew how to have sex and eat, but they didn't understand even maternal care, which there's a lot of evidence that says it's not innate. Maternal care is a learned process. And I mean, abortion in and of itself suggests it's learned and not innate. I mean, so this is a very important thing if generations are deprived of experiences for productive work that meets their basic needs to live. And, you know, it's about as simple as if you go down to a simple cell, if there's not stress, stresslessness equals lifelessness. So you do need stress. So don't buy what you're told by the political class and frankly, most of the psychology profession too. Stresslessness equals death. Okay. So you need productive stress that will guide you to productive work. And of course, that's why our hope and opportunity-based system has flourished for so long. But if you take away productive stress and you minimize productive work, and in time, you see other things developing, and I'm afraid that's what we've got here. And I mean, the cannibalism is just horrific. I mean, they were instead of maternally taking care of their young, the mothers were eating their young and killing them. And you know, this was a behavior. You know, we're inherently aggressive, all of us. We have inherent aggression, and if you turn it in on yourself, it's depression, right? Well, we don't want to do that, but you need acceptable ways to show that aggression. You know, sports is a perfectly acceptable way. Going out and running, working out, physical exercise is acceptable. Or just a work a day is a very acceptable way. It takes a lot of energy. It takes focused aggression, focused to to perform a day of productive work. But when you're in a society that takes away those things, you're in a different place. You're still this aggressive human being. You're still feeling it, but you have no access to a productive outlet for it. So it becomes unproductive. And Mouse Utopia was the same thing. And this is a moment to really think. We're going to take this talk about Mouse Utopia, and we're going to talk about what changes we're seeing in our culture in the family unit in a country today that has over 33% of all children are raised in a single parent setting. We're going to talk about the 100 programs of welfare. We're going to talk about if that changes some of the traditionally learned appropriate forms of aggression that parents gave off in caring for their young. And if it changes, how's it changing and what kind of a way? We're not suggesting we're going to start eating our children by any means, but we need to look at that because it is a significant change from what used to be. And it is changing the family structure and the demographics, although we're getting a lot of young immigrants internally. Our population is withering too, not on the level of Japan or China, but it's happening all over the industrialized world, independent of politics. Okay, independent of politics. So it's very important to understand this. So we're going to talk about that in the future, and we're also going to talk about geopolitical problems that are leading to trade wars, sanction wars, currency wars, and God help us if not a fighting war. So we're gonna go through all those things in the next 2 weeks. We hope you stay with us. I hope you've enjoyed Mouse Utopia, even though it ended up in a despotic destruction of the whole colony. That was terrible, just a terrible thing. And I hope you have a blessed week. And this is Tony Christ signing off and saying, look forward to seeing you next week.